Good morning, Little Masters. Welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's go ahead and wrap up week 18 with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, these Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legends of the Elder Days, whether they're from the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, or more. Now, when I started this third series, I returned to my favorite First Age piñata, Fëanor, but we didn't finish the chapter. So, let's go back and wrap up of Fëanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. While still in his early youth, he wedded Noldorin, the daughter of a great smith named Matan, among those of the Noldor most dear to Aule. And of Matan he learned much of the making of things in metal and in stone. Noldorin was also firm of will, but more patient than Fëanor, desiring to understand minds rather than to master them. And at first she restrained him when the fire of his heart grew too hot. But his later deeds grieved her, and they became estranged. 7 sons she bore to Fëanor. Her mood she bequeathed in part to some of them, but not to all. Now it came to pass that Finwë took as his second wife Indis the Fair. She was a Vanya, close kin of Ingwe the High King, golden-haired and tall, and in all ways unlike Miriel. Finwë loved her greatly and was glad again. But the shadow of Miriel did not depart from the house of Finwë, nor from his heart. And of all whom he loved, Fëanor had ever the chief share of his thought. The wedding of his father was not pleasing to Fëanor, and he had no great love for Indis, nor for Fingolfin and Finarfin, her sons. He lived apart from them, exploring the land of Aman, or busying himself with the knowledge and the crafts in which he delighted. In those unhappy things which later came to pass, and in which Fëanor was the leader, many saw the effect of this breach within the house of Finwë, judging that if Finwë had endured his loss and been content with the fathering of his mighty son, the courses of Fëanor would have been otherwise, and great evil might have been prevented. For the sorrow and the strife in the house of Finwë is graven in the memory of the Noldorin Elves. But the children of Indis were great and glorious, and their children also, and if they had not lived, the history of the Eldar would have been diminished. Now even while Fëanor and the craftsmen of the Noldor worked with delight, foreseeing no end to their labors, and while the sons of Indis grew to their full stature, the noontide of Valinor was drawing to its close. For it came to pass that Melkor, as the Valar had decreed, completed the term of his bondage, dwelling for 3 ages in the duress of Mandos, alone. At length, as Manwë had promised, he was brought again before the thrones of the Valar. Then he looked upon their glory and their bliss, and envy was in his heart. He looked upon the children of Ilúvatar that sat at the feet of the mighty, and hatred filled him. He looked upon the wealth of bright gems, and he lusted for them. But he hid his thoughts and postponed his vengeance. Before the gates of Valmar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valar in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he had done to the world. And Nienna aided his prayer, but Mandos was silent. Then Manwë granted him pardon, but the Valar would not yet suffer him to depart beyond their sight and vigilance, and he was constrained to dwell within the gates of Valmar. But fair seeming were all the words and deeds of Melkor in that time, and both the Valar and the Eldar had profit from his aid and counsel, if they sought it, and therefore in a while he was given leave to go freely about the land. And it seemed to Manwë that the evil of Melkor was cured. For Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it, and he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Ilúvatar, Melkor had been even as he. And he saw not to the depths of Melkor's heart, and did not perceive that all love had departed from him forever. But Ulmo was not deceived, and Tulkas clenched his hands whenever he saw Melkor his foe go by. For if Tulkas is slow to wrath, he is slow also to forget. But they obeyed the judgment of Manwë, for those who will defend authority against rebellion must not themselves rebel. Now in his heart Melkor most hated the Eldar, both because they were fair and joyful, and because in them he saw the reason for the arising of the Valar and his own downfall. Therefore all the more did he feign love for them and seek their friendship, and he offered them the service of his lore and labor in any great deed that they would do. The Vanyar indeed held him in suspicion, for they dwelt in the light of the trees and were content. And to the Teledry he gave small heed, thinking them of little worth, tools too weak for his designs. But the Noldor took delight in the hidden knowledge that he could reveal to them, and some hearkened to words that it would have been better for them never to have heard. Melkor indeed declared afterwards that Fëanor had learned much art from him in secret, and had been instructed by him in the greatest of all his works. But he lied in his lust and his envy, for none of the Eldalier ever hated Melkor more than Fëanor, son of Finwë, who first named him Morgoth. And snared though he was in the webs of Melkor's malice against the Valar, he held no converse with him, and took no counsel from him. For Fëanor was driven by the fire of his own heart only, working ever swiftly and alone, and he asked the aid and sought the counsel of none that dwelt in Aman, great or small, save only, and for a little while, of Nerdinel the Wise, his wife. Now, I just want to chat about a few things here. First off, Nerdinel. She was strong-willed but patient. I love this about her. That line, desiring to understand minds rather than to master them, certainly suggests that Fëanor's interest was more in mastering the minds of others. Now, that goes hand in hand with his description as being masterful. And it's honestly just another example of Fëanor reflecting one of the sins of Melkor, in this case, dominating over others. And then also on Nerdinel, this is interesting. In Laws and Customs of the Eldar in the History of Middle-earth, we read that there were seldom more than 4 children in any house, and that Fëanor was renowned as the father of 7 sons, and the histories record none that surpassed him. Hey, can we stop for a moment and just say the histories record none that surpassed Nerdinel instead? I mean, she gave birth to all 7 of those, so I think she needs a little credit there. Thank you very much. Now, we see another one of the sins of Melkor, by the way, self-isolation, in how Fëanor refuses to live with his family because he doesn't like his half-brothers. These aren't stepbrothers from Indus's first marriage. These are Finwë's sons. They're just not Miriel's sons. And then, of course, we also see impatience and pride in Fëanor, again echoing those sins of Melkor. And finally, that bit about the children of Indus being great and glorious, man, that is so true. Nearly all of the names of the Noldorin elves that we love are descended from Indus. Get this: Fingolfin, Finrod, Turgon, Gilgalad, Galadriel, Elrond, even Aragorn can trace his ancestry back to Indus. Now, there's a lot about Melkor to talk about here, but the truth is I'm out of time for today. That does it for this week's Silmarillion Saturday and for week 18 of today's Tolkien Times. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode which you could watch today, and a whole lot more. And folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.